Well, hello there, community. Welcome to DevCentral Connects, and today we are going to talk about the application study tool. And I will hold off on what the heck that is when I bring on my guests. But for now, I wanted to talk about the app world coming up. Let me get that shared. We have App World 2025 Las Vegas, and that is February 25th through the 27th. You can register today. So I highly encourage you to do that. We'll be out there. The whole DevCentral team will be out there. And a lot of your favorite solution engineers and product managers. And we have a lot of breakout sessions and labs, and it'll be a great time. So make sure you get registered for that. Again, that's February 25th through the 27th. Also, if you missed Monday, Boo and Aubrey joined me for Advent of Code. And if you're not familiar with that, it's just adventofcode.com. And it's a series of puzzle challenges that you can solve in whatever language that you want to solve it in. I was teasing Boo, I think when he started last year, 2 years ago, when we started, he solved the first exercise in Excel, which I thought was cool. But the show from Monday, we actually solved part one in an iRule, and so that was pretty cool. So go check that out, and that's Advent of Code. And if you want to join us, it's not too late. On DevCentral in the water cooler, we have the code to join our private leaderboard. I'm not a speed coder. I'm not in the first 100 across the world that gets on the leaderboard for Advent of Code, but we do have our own little private leaderboard if you want to get involved and start. So that is my update for pre-show. Let me go ahead and bring on my guests. All right, gentlemen, how are you today? Today I have Mike. I'll introduce you first. Mike Wachter. He's a senior manager for the solutions engineers. Mike, how are you doing today?
Very well, thanks, Jason.
And we go back a little ways. You were in our very first class of DevCentral MVPs back. Was that 2011? Is that right?
I was, in fact, 2011. I believe it was in Chicago, but yeah, a DevCentral MVP at that time. So go back a pretty long way.
Yeah, that Thinkubator place that we had our thing, and that was amazing. I haven't had a space like that for an event in quite a while. And then, of course, we have Chris Hain. Chris, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Good deal. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to put myself on the bottoms because y'all are going to do most of the talking here. But, today we're talking about the application study tool. So maybe, Mike, can you give us an idea? Like, first of all, what is it? And then, why does it exist? What need is it meeting?
Yeah, and Chris, please feel free to add color commentary to it, because I take a different view, right? Obviously, as a customer for many, many years, being in that operational model for, close to 8 or 9 years, running big IPs, and then moving on over into the sales side, right? So AST essentially, so it's the application study tool, and obviously we need to find probably a better name for that going forward. But for all intents and purposes, it's to provide insights and data visualization. And you could kind of pause there and be like, okay, what's insight? What's data visualization? Well, at least from a big IP standpoint, it's going in, showing you a lot of metrics, a lot of data that's historical data, a lot of data that's you can take into account, provide analysis on, and get your own type of feedback layer, if that makes sense. So for all intents and purposes, it's an insights tool. It's to provide you visualization of those of that data being collected. And really, if you take a step back, it's providing that very basic core fundamental infrastructure view of performance, uptime, security events across your big IP portfolio. In some cases, customers have hundreds of big IP instances, in some cases thousands, and they need a tool to provide them with A, the health of that environment, and B, you might have application running in one data center, and it could be running half the time in another, and you don't really have a comparison of performance going back and forth. So I think overall, just from a high level, from an AST, what is it? It's a tool to provide you insights and data visualization of your big IPs. I don't know, Chris, if you want to add anything onto that one, but
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think it's exactly that. It's like, I've only been at F5 for a few years, but when I got here, it's like the big IP itself is kind of this black box of like, what is going on inside this thing? How's it operating? Like, there are obviously tools out there that even I'm sure your audience has built some integrations to kind of pull data out of it and get it into systems where they can monitor it along with the rest of their, real estate, as it were. So this is about making that kind of easier, a little bit more seamless out of the box experience to, one, provide you those views, but also to help you integrate those views with your other data sets that you might have. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. And we'll get into the nuts and bolts. You can walk us through a demo here in a few minutes. But I want to say hi, friend of the show, Jose. Good to see you. And VS 90, Nini, that's probably not it. Hello, welcome to the show. I'm not going to call you Nini. I might call you Nini, but VS is like is that Josh? Is that okay? Now I feel bad for calling you a Nini, but Josh is one of our MVPs in today. So thanks for joining, guys. Okay, so Mike, I'm going to share your screen now, and you want to kind of walk us through first of all, high level, how what tools are composed of AST? Like what's the stack look like?
Yeah, so to your point and what Chris was saying, right? It's the views, the insights that really matter. So if you take it a step further, it's customers that really need these insights. For instance, say you either buy a bunch of big IPs and say they're 20 big IPs, and maybe you have 100 instances. Trying to get a view of each one of those instances is key. Or maybe you're hired by a corporation that already has a bunch of big IPs and in the production environment, and you have a lot of history with that. You have a lot of knowledge around F5, but being able to deliver AST in such a way that it can provide those type of insights for you. I think this is the foundational concept that we were building, and there's a lot more. As you could probably read the tea leaves, right? Is that once we go through the demo, we go through the process of what it is, the makeup. You'll see the framework is very well built for other things from a roadmap standpoint. So if there are any features or any functions you might find interesting or might be enticed to even go do a deeper dive, please let us know. We're adding features and functions to this all the time. So again, that feedback is always important. So that's kind of my intro there. So AST is really built upon, I would say, the open source tools and the best of the best. If you take a look at it, especially having Chris's feedback from the open source community, having the best tooling, we really wanted to take a look at what's out there in the environment and the open source side. What can we use to develop the insights, those dashboards, that visualization concept in such a way that's easy to use, it's easy to install, and it's very easy to maintain. So that was kind of at least from my standpoint, the mantra that the team took on, right? Is that we don't want to make this so cumbersome that it becomes an overhead, a burden to keep this up and operational. So I think, Chris, just in my thoughts that honestly, the way it's built out, is the framework, the foundation is key, and then we can build upon that as we go forward. So I don't know if you have anything to add on to that.
Yeah, that was essentially it. Is we wanted to take open source tooling that is available and widely used at organizations of all sizes, right? Most of the components here, there might already be teams in your organization that are running those for application monitoring or other types of observability initiatives that you have, and we want to be able to play in that space and make it really intuitive. If you're not in an organization that has those things where they have different views of what those things should be, we want to interoperate with those as well, and we'll talk about how that works with the open telemetry collector and stuff as we go forward.
Yeah, so that's a very good point, and I think the key and foundational, the very, very core of it is open telemetry. I think that's a pretty well settled technology, and it's one that's very widespread adoption across not only F5 but across the community, right? From any infrastructure vendors, you got firewalls, you got switches, you got all that those players in the mix, and OTel seems to be the very core and foundation for insights, analytics, metrics, if you will. So once you get AST up and running, I won't go through the install. I know Jason will cover that here in a bit. So I'll do a quick run through. But once you have AST up and running, again, there's really a core concepts of not only just the tools being used, but there's core concepts of OpenTelemetry and the views that you get within it. And from my point of view, there's really three views. I call it three layers. The first layer is what we call the big IP fleet view. And the fleet view is, hey, we have hundreds of big IP instances, or we have big IP instances spread across the globe. I need a fleet view. That fleet view is very critical in going in and getting the health of your virtual servers. And I interchange virtual servers and applications. So if anybody gets confused, I'm just going to say applications, because at the end of the day, I care about apps up and running. And that's really my mantra and goal. So you have applications running globally. How do you get a very good view of that, at least from a big IP standpoint? How can you go in and check the SLA, the uptime? How can you go in and see how many configuration changes occurred? Can you go in and look at the connection rate? Can you see how many people are attempting to connect in that are bad actors from a WAF standpoint? So overall, that's our goal. And I think we achieved that pretty well. And I'll go ahead and click on it here. And we'll go back and talk about some of the other dashboards going forward. But let me just take a quick view here for you.
And real quick, just so I'm clear and the audience is clear, you don't have to do anything to your big IP except connect to it, right? I don't have to install an agent. I don't have to, configure any kind of a, I know with the declarative stuff, you have the the telemetry services that you could package that you could deploy to your big IP. I don't need any of that, right? I just need an API.
That's a fantastic. I think overall the team took into account. Let me just give you a little bit of feedback and background on how that came about. So I think the team, especially Chris and the office of the CTO, they really looked at it from a standpoint of what is the least common denominator that all customers have from F5. It's a big IP instance, right? Whether that's on a piece of hardware, whether that's on a virtual edition, what have you. If you up and take another step up and you start looking at potential modules, potential licensing, we wanted to stay away from all of that. So once you go and say the common denominator is a big IP instance, that is the only requirement that we have. Outside of that, I think the team really looked within and said, okay, that's our target audience, everyone. It's not a subset of customers within F5. It's not some vertical within F5 that can use this tool. It's everybody. So I think overall, going in, and to your point, Jason, about there's no agent being needed, there's no extra out-of-band things that have to be added, just a user ID and password, and of course AST. But for all intents and purposes, that was the common denominator across the board. We wanted to stay that way, and I think we met that criteria pretty well. I don't know, Chris, if you have any other things added on it, but I think overall, just the team's goal of reaching the broadest of audience, I think, was key to making this happen.
Yeah. So just more concretely, it's just a collector, an OpenTelemetry collector, is the core of AST. So that'll be running on a virtual machine or wherever you want to run this container, and it will be reaching out via iControl REST to big IP instances. So that's all it does. There's no telemetry streaming. There's not any of the other optional modules that you might have enabled in the past to get some of these sorts of views. This is just iControl REST calls.
So I don't have my soundboard up and connected to this live stream, but there would be celebrating going on in the background if I did. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Jason, thanks for bringing that up. I think it's key in overall conversation, right? That there's no extra tooling, there's no extra things that need to be added. So that's a huge benefit. So as I was talking about those different layers, right? So we talked about the fleet view, and I'm going to go through here and kind of just quickly talk about some of the dashboarding. But again, the fleet view is a holistic overview of all your big IP instances. And in this demo, I don't have hundreds or thousands of big IPs to show you. So that's, I apologize for that. But there are customers that are using this with hundreds of big IP instances, and you get a pretty good overview. And the larger the screen you have, the better. And as Chris mentioned or alluded to, you don't have to use our Grafana if you don't want to. You can use Grafana SaaS, you can use other tooling, you can use other dashboards that are available. So that's, again, the beauty of being open telemetry as a core foundation. You can customize and extend this to pretty much whatever you want. So going back to the fleet dashboard, I have a couple devices here, 3 devices specifically. I show you average CPU across the device, memory, disk utilization, configured pool members, virtual servers, total bytes in and out. And that's just one dashboard. So when I talk about the fleet view, there's 4 specific dashboards. And one's device utilization, of course, that's pretty obvious, right? Device utilization, CPU, memory, all the things that you would know and come to want from an infrastructure standpoint. When you look and click on fleet inventory, we have the ability, and this to me is awesome, especially when F5, unfortunately, we're all human, we write code, that there's quarterly security notifications are being sent out. You can quickly get a very broad view of all your big IPs and go, okay, one version's on 16.1.2.1, another big IP is on 17.1.1.4. I need to go in and solve for these CVEs. I can quickly have a pretty broad view of all this data and say, okay, this CVE applies to this version, applies to that version, etc. In addition to that, the cool thing about this is that you can go in, I know at least in my prior organizations before working here at F5, we had committees that really wanted a lot of this data in CSV format. So the cool thing about Grafana and just using that as a framework, you can export all this data within a CSV format file. And you can go and say, hey, team that's doing my audits or team that's doing my QSN type reporting, I can go and show them that all my big IPs are this model, this version, etc. And it's fairly easy to do. So that's just clicking on 3 buttons, going to share, and off you go. I'll go ahead and click off of the inventory view. I will go, and I think this honestly is table stakes. It's SSL certificate status. It depends on your organization. In some organizations, they have automation that goes from very beginning to very end, and that's fantastic. But for having this view, I guess overall within this dashboard, it provides you with that insight. And I know there's some people that have heartache or heartburn when you say Grafana has plugins to deal with some alerting. Well, in fact, yeah, that's true. You can put in some plugins and you can have automation kick off based off of alerting within Grafana or within a certain metric within Grafana. And again, this just shows you your entire fleet. So again, not one big IP, not 2. In my case, I have 3 big IPs here running in my demo, but in other organizations, I've seen them running hundreds of big IPs, and they had no idea that some of these expired certs were still existing on their big IPs, or they had some certs that were expiring in a couple of weeks. They really didn't have input into that, so they didn't know that information. By having this view, it's pretty alarming. It's pretty straightforward in what we're providing, but it's very good information in order to keep your app up and running.
Well, then that's critical too, because I mean, even in 2024, almost 2025, I mean, a month doesn't go by that some service isn't failing because some operational team lost visibility into the fact that their certificates are expiring.
Well, I was in the operational side of it, and there's been a few occasions to where those certs have expired, and unfortunately, it just went by. Just everybody's busy doing something, and sometimes that little task that you have just went unnoticed. And so, unfortunately, I have brought applications down before, so I have lived that experience. Going back to the fleet view again on the virtual server side. Again, as I stated before, we have different layers, and I'll talk about those layers. This is just the first. But we provide you with that virtual server view across your entire portfolio. And you can go in, and the cool thing about Grafana, if you have experience with Grafana, awesome. If you don't, I think it's a great time to learn because overall, I think that's where the industry is headed. It's kind of these open source tools that provide that visualization output. So if I want to search on for instance, a virtual server, I can do that specifically. I can do a device. I can hunker down and say I just want to choose one device if I so chose. But again, the beauty of it is that it's flexible. It's up to you on what you want to see and how you want to see it. Again, providing you with have any changes occurred in the past 24 hours. And if there have, how many? Now, going back, like I said, we have 3 different layers and 3 different views. So on the fleet view, we just show you a high-level virtual server information. So if there's been 5 changes on the virtual server side, we'll show you that number. If there's changes on the pool member side, we have actually a pool member change notification and a node member change notification. So think of it as those different views, right? From high level, it's virtual server, and then you work your way down. That's just common load balancing techniques. So that is the fleet
on
view.
your virtual server filter.
Yeah.
If you have the same virtual server name in multiple devices, will it show all of them?
Yep. Mhm.
In the fleet view, yes.
Okay.
So the fleet views are, multiple devices and then whatever dimension you select in the dropdowns. There's another view where it's a device specific view, and then it's just the device that you're looking at. But yes, in this view it will. I think it's probably a good time to mention as well, like the dropdowns will let you filter the data and stuff, but just to hammer the point home, the panels that you see here, the dashboards themselves, all of this is 100% configurable by you, the customer. So if you hate this particular panel and you just never want to see it again, delete it. If you want to change it so that it shows something in a slightly different way, add a column to it, change the way the labels work, all of that is very doable. And you can kind of just use this as the starting point, not the final product. So, everybody's got their own opinions about how data should be displayed and how they want to, build things around their workflows. And we want to enable that here.
I don't know any technologists that are opinionated.
Yeah.
Everybody wants the same thing. That's why
I've built
we
some
have only
perfect,
one standard for everything, right?
I built the most perfect dashboards that have ever existed, and then as soon as I show them to anybody, it's, oh, can you change this? And it's, no.
Yeah,
You
that's
change it.
great.
So,
Literally, I mean, Chris.
You can say like hold them for later, or we can answer them now. But what is that tool name? I don't know, Gordon. Are you asking about the application study tool that all of this platform stuff is built upon, or you just specifically this Grafana and Prometheus, the kind of some of the platform components that make up application study tool? So if you can clarify on that, and then what about iRule changes? So in your fleet view, if you have made changes or whatever, that's going to show up in that one dashboard you're showing.
Yeah. So believe it or not, whenever you make a change on a virtual server side, there actually is. It's kind of strange. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a revision number, believe it or not, and there's a status and timestamp of when you made that change. So that's where we're getting this information. That's how we're gathering it, right? Is doing that timestamp, seeing what changed, and then how many changes, right? So if you did one change to 20, that will show up in that number of how many you've done. So.
Okay, so if like I'm in iRule's development process, those are gonna leap to the top of the pad.
Yeah. No, that's a unique thing, and it's something I'm glad you brought up. We actually have a view of iRules, which I'd love to show people and get their feedback on. But yeah, that's that will happen. And
okay, and then
before I go any further, this is
got a couple more questions real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Can I export the report? I think you said yes. You can export all of these different dashboards, right? Can you export it all in one swoop, or is it dashboard by dashboard?
It's dashboard by dashboard. I don't know, Chris, if there's a way. I've used Grafana before in my previous life, but I haven't really dug into the development of it. Do you know if there's a way to?
I don't think you can export them all to CSV. You could probably dump it all into a PDF or something and just have like the page view of the thing that you get when you're looking at it here. It's also got share buttons, so you can link people to the exact view that you're looking at if they have access to the Grafana instance itself.
Yeah. Does Grafana itself?
So to that point, you can just share.
Sorry, I missed that question.
Oh, I was saying.
Use that one more time.
Can you? Does Grafana have an API? Can I pull away from?
There are APIs, and yeah, you might be able to pull the data out through those.
Okay.
I haven't looked at it.
Might be enough. His second question here is: do we have a dedicated dashboard for API discovery?
Oh, that's. I'm glad you brought that one up. That's actually something that Chris and I have been working on for a little while now. It's a small subset of API discovery, and heck, it might be worth another conversation, Jason. But to answer that question directly. The answer is yes. We have a small subset of that. We have been working on that for quite some time, so we are looking for customer feedback as we start moving forward with that.
Yeah. So
Okay.
just tactically, there's a separate repo with that in it. For now, the AST repo does not include the API discovery dashboards and additional tooling.
Okay, so I'm going to answer one more question, and then we'll hold for a while so you can continue on with your demo. And the other one, Prof says, "What is this application for?" And you said at the top of the show, this is visibility and insights, right? It's observability. It's going to go out to your big IP infrastructure, whichever part of your infrastructure you want to include. It's going to pull in all of the observability data from those. I don't know if you have coverage across all modules yet, but system level stuff for sure is going to be in there, and you can flesh that out as we go and kind of talk through that. And then Martin, I see your question. Let's hold that off just until Mike has a chance to go through some more demo.
Yeah, and to add some additional context to the modules, right? So we're still working on additional iterations of this. So for now, it covers LTM, DNS, and WAF. Obviously, we're working on additional modules as we move forward. So if there's any feedback around AFM, APM, please let us know. Please send me a note specifically. Jason, I don't know if you'll share my email, but I'm looking for feedback, and the more feedback, the better. I think
There's
that's
feedback in the question right there. I was looking for CCU. Yeah.
Oh, okay. There we go. Perfect.
Brought up APM. I'll just go ahead and throw that up there for Martin's question now.
There we go. Yeah. So the CCU, actually, I have that on my little feedback list that I have. So that's awesome that it's kind of confirmed from more than a couple customers. So that's great. But yeah, CCUs is definitely on the list.
Cool.
So before I go any further, though, one thing I do want to talk about, because it's always a topic of discussion, and for all intents and purposes, I'd say it happens last, just because it's not really a cool way of looking at your infrastructure. But I do want to touch upon it because it's very useful from a technical standpoint and why AST was even created. But if you click on what we call the big IP collector stats, again, I just want to touch upon this and kind of give a good overview of what it's doing and how it's working. So as you know, being, an operational person here at FI, being on the sales side, everybody has these concerns around the control plane. Whether you're automating or not, whether you're doing SNMP or not, they have concerns. So I wanted to kind of address that here right out of the conversation. One, from my standpoint, we have the feedback that we've received so far. Some customers, based off of using AST, they have actually stopped using SNMP altogether. And the reason why that is because when they give the keys to the kingdom from SNMP access standpoint to certain NOCs, or what they call SOC, depending on the acronym, they kind of run wild on the big IP and other infrastructure vendors. What does that mean? They'll do an SNMP call, they'll wait for that, and they could be constantly hitting the big IP for data, for objects, and doing the SNMP walk. But they really don't optimize. They don't know what to look at. They just gather all this data. So the awesome thing about AST is that we're very precise in the API call, very precise in what we're gathering and how we're gathering it. So I just want to really emphasize is that we just don't want to scrape a big IP for every single piece of data that's out there, every single metric that's available. That's not useful. And it's kind of insane because you'll be overwhelmed with all that data. So the great thing about working with people that understand the metric side of the house, what is really important to a customer, and what's key to making sure that we provide that right visibility and observability within AST. So the dashboard itself shows us, how long has it taken to process on a big IP the full duration of all these API requests. We'll provide you that within seconds, milliseconds even. We'll also provide you that specific API call that we're going up against and gathering that data and put it in with an OTel format. We'll provide you how long that took to process. And then we'll also show you from an authentication standpoint, okay, is it a 200, is it a 400, or what have you? So fundamentally, is my user ID right? Number one. And then number two, sometimes, user IDs and passwords rather, they kind of rotate based off of the security of the organization. And what we have the ability to do, and to me, again, just using the best of open source tooling, just a side effect of it, is that you can go in, and if you have a secret or a vault rather, and if you're very comfortable with using secrets, being able to integrate that in with the system, it's fantastic. So I don't know, Chris, I think there's a lot going on in the collector stats side of the house that I could probably talk about, but I'll kind of leave it to the expert.
Yeah, I mean, we really wanted to make sure that we had visibility into what this thing was doing, because again, I've run into it in other products in other places where, yeah, SNMP is just enumerating MIBs and throttling the CPUs, and it's just nuts. So for sure, we wanted to give that visibility. You'll get a default configuration that scrapes a bunch of endpoints. Some of those endpoints are more taxing to the box than others. So there's some things that are, running bash commands to get data out of specific things that you couldn't get just from the straight REST endpoints. But every single one of those is configurable independently. So if you are finding that the CPU load is too heavy for some particular modules or calls that we're making, you can disable those, or you could make them run at intervals that are longer than the default of, I think it's a minute now. I don't remember exactly, but if you want to go faster, you can go faster. If you want to go slower, you could go slower. But it's all about that configurability and that ease of, discovering exactly what is going on, so that if you think that this thing is impacting one of your boxes, you can confirm that and then potentially address it without having to just turn it off outright. Right?
Yeah, that's excellent.
Chris, that's a great point to make. And so, obviously I'm very transparent. So if anybody knows me, I'm very transparent, probably, but we have customers that have, thousands of applications, thousands of VIPs on, say, for instance, a DNS box. Well, guess what? That's going to take a little bit longer to query. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, because there's a lot of data. So what we're able to do, and as Chris pointed out, and using the open source tooling, is that you can customize this. So being able to go in and say, I want to set my duration limit to, say, 60 seconds or 90 or 30. That is awesome. That's a great thing to do. And then you can go in specifically to that specific API call if you want, and you can either knock that out of the total list to even process. You can comment it out, whatever. But the point being is that it's very customizable, and something that I think, like I said, I wanted to address before I go any further, because in all honesty, SNMP to me is I don't say an old school tool. It's kind of archaic in nature. But if you just let people run wild with that, you are going to get significantly higher control plane usage on the big IP. It's something that I think we should have addressed as an organization from F5 organization years ago, but we haven't. So again, if you have control plane issues, take a look at your folks running SNMP. Just have them take a look at it, see what they're going, see what the iterative actions on those walks are, and see what objects they are collecting.
I might have been guilty back in the day, but to be fair, there wasn't an iControl REST interface at that time. But I ran a Cacti server that gave some of this data and across mine, because I think I had like 55 big IPs through all the different production and test environments, and just to be able to visualize all that data, it was all SNMP. And we didn't do ourselves any favors by indexing all our OIDs, and so it was not awesome.
Oh, yeah, I mean, for sure, though. But there's a time and place for everything, right? So I'm not saying anything that was wrong in the past. It's just there's a time and place. As technology improves, things start getting a little bit easier to develop on and to really visualize.
Yeah,
I think
that's a really key point, is like big IP has been around a lot longer than these technologies have been out in the public, at least. Maybe in some of the hyperscalers you could find equivalent things 10, 15 years ago, but the open source world has come a long ways, and this is really just about catching up to where it's kind of been at. Right?
Yeah, that's a great point. So as I mentioned earlier, I think back in the broadcast, one is that we have different layers of view, right? So the first was the fleet view. I think we pretty much get that idea, the concept of wherever your big IP instances exist, wherever they are at this point in time, the fleet view is a great dashboard to have. It shows you that visualization, shows you the availability of virtual servers. You can share this with application owners, so on and so forth. But then you start looking at, I would say, a different view. One is more specific to a device, number one, and how is that device performing underneath the hood. And we have a couple different things, and again, feedback is crucial. So if you find a dashboard name probably needs to be changed, or needs to be a little bit more, I would say, basic in terms of understanding. Like we have HTTP profile or DNS profile. That might need to change, right? To where we can come up with a clever name to make it a little bit more sensible from that standpoint. But as I was going back and referring to that second step, right, going into a specific device. So as you see here, I have multiple devices on my list. I can click on one, I can click on whatever. So if you look at this dashboard in of itself, we'll provide you with a configuration of a HTTP profile. In some cases, customers have hundreds of HTTP profiles. They all have a customized profile per application, whether that's a publicly facing one where it has to sit on the WAN, or something more internal where it sits directly on the LAN, right? There's always different profiles, and we're able to, through certain commands, provide you with that profile view of what is different amongst all of that. In some cases, you might find an application runs very well and it's performant when you have certain LAN settings that you want to mimic across the board. You can go in here and gather that profile and compare that with other profiles that are in production, which is great to have. And overall, in some cases, this is, again, a very high-level overview, but it's more device-centric, is that we can provide you with 200 error code response codes, 400 response codes, at a very generic device-level profile-specific view. Now, we can provide you that also within the virtual server standpoint, but again, from a device overview, we provide you with this information. Sending rate method, status, all that fun stuff. And this view was really created because in some cases, there are customers that have PCI environments. It's strictly dedicated to PCI. And in other organizations, which they're very lucky to have, they have big IPs that are strictly dedicated to maybe one or two applications. And those are production revenue generating apps. Being able to provide this view is pretty critical from that standpoint. I'll go back and click on what we call the DNS view. So this DNS view here, I don't have a lot of DNS requests, and that's just my fault. I don't have a lot of data going through my demo environment. But we do provide you with request rate, zone details, cache information, things like that. So again, if you have any feedback on what you'd want to see, what you want to elaborate it on, please let us know. We can get that added.
A couple more questions real quick.
So that is one view. Yeah.
If you got a second, Mike. Ahmed, do we have limitations on the number of big IPs that can be added to the tool? You said in some cases that people have thousands, right?
Right, yeah. So right now we have so the cool thing about AST is that you can have multiple AST environments. So literally what I mean, let's just say you have 3 data centers and you have 500 big IPs in each data center. You might want an AST instance in each one of those data centers. One customer has 100 big IPs running on AST. Other customers have multiple AST installations running that are specific to that data center. So I haven't seen anything above 100 yet, personally, from a customer standpoint. But I do know that we have customers running AST in multiple locations for that specific need.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are basically 3 components we have to worry about, right? There's the collectors, which are the things that are actually talking to the big IPs and fetching the data. And then there's the Prometheus instance, which is storing it all and letting you query it. And then Grafana, but Grafana is pretty lightweight. To scale the first 2, so scaling the collector, one collector can easily do hundreds, maybe 1,000. I don't know. But the cool thing is you add a second collector with the same configuration, basically tell it to send it to the same spot, and now you've doubled your capacity, right? So it's horizontally scalable in that way. And then it's really just a matter of how do you shard up the config so that, this set gets scraped by this collector, this set gets scraped by the other one. The Prometheus side, it's a little more complicated. You got, obviously disk space, you've got to worry about memory utilization for the Prometheus instance itself. But again, same sorts of things, multiple Prometheuses. You can have the Grafana pointing at them. There are ways to scale it to very large.
More of like a Kubernetes cluster and whatever, you can scale that out pretty well.
Yeah. Presumably, if you're in the type of organization that has thousands of these big IPs, you've probably got some scalable metrics.
And a team that can help you
Exactly.
reconfigure the config files. Another question here. Ultimately, Mike, comes down to support. It's a community support, F5 support. Is this So where are we with that?
Yeah. So as of 12.5, it's community supported. As of next month, I can't make promises, but I do know that there's a lot of movement to make this a product, and we have that promise. So as of 12.5, community supported. That's going to change. I'd be willing to put a significant wager on that one, but it will be a product going forward.
Okay, cool. And this is a good question from data retention period. How long is that data? Is it there forever, or is it going to rotate out?
So I forget exactly what the default is set to, but it's 100% configurable. I think it's probably like a year by default. I don't remember. But yeah, do what you want. Pay for the disk and it's all good.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Sorry for the interruption, Mike.
No worries. So going back to the different views, right, of, you got the first step, which is fleet. You have some more specific views within that device itself. But then you start getting into really the nitty gritty of a device. What I mean by nitty gritty, I mean by looking at, memory, CPU, iRoll, top 10 apps, things like that. So I'll actually start from the bottom up. When I click on top in, top in, obviously you can likely customize that. But for example, right, many organizations, many customers come to us from a sales side and say, Mike, we have hundreds of applications running. I need to get rid of the noise. How can I do that? I need to know my top hitters that are running on my big IP appliance. By using the top in dashboard, we're able to provide you with the top 10 BIPs by CPU, so the low LTM processing compute utilization of your instance, the WAF CPU utilization of your instance. So we're not just taking LTM and just say, okay, that's your average CPU. There's actually different components to that. Yeah, ASM, you have DNS, you got LTM, you got all these different layers. So we're providing you with that information of, okay, here's my overall CPU from each different module for that specific application. Again, we provide you with the ACD, so that's analysis, control, and data plane. Provide you with the top 10 members for active connections, low availability rate. And the reason why that was actually key and crucial, there's actually two reasons. Whenever a customer gets a request, or whenever that team, the NetOps team for the most part, or app team gets a request to, hey, let's build out an application, 9 times out of 10, they never receive a notification to decommission that application. So it's always a lot of work to keep track of that, to audit it. So what we've done is actually provided the ability to look at what virtual servers, what pool members, what nodes are not in use. So you can go ahead and remove them from your configuration. So that's pretty key. Down here below, we have object count, profile types. I won't talk about this because there's a lot more to cover, but go in, take a look at it. Again, overall, please provide that feedback if you can, and let us know what you'd like to see here, at least on the top 10 side. Here's some iRolls, right? Top 10 iRolls running on your clients. Nothing too crazy, but anyways, that's a top 10. And that's, again, to kind of get rid of the noise. When we look at the WAF overview, again, this is device specific. So in some cases, some devices don't have WAF, some do. You can go ahead and click on the device that has your WAF module enabled and your security profiles set up. It's just going to provide you with a view of how many incidents occurred in the past hour, in the past 24 hours, brute force attacks, bot incidents. It's going to show you signature count, what features are enabled. So my screen's a little small here, so where it says status enabled and disabled, you can do a quick overview of that, get that ability to do a review there. When we move out of the WAF side, click my device. We'll go back into, click on, say, virtual server details. Again, device specific, you can go in and get very good information. All these drop downs here, like CPU utilization, you can get configured objects. I won't click on every single one, but it'll show you what iRolls are applied to virtual server, CPU, HTTP status codes, different things for each virtual server. So again, this is really key to share amongst your application owners. As a very good steward of your big IP, of your platform, you want to share this information. So again, share this dashboard with your app owners. They might have an application that's receiving different error codes that's very much unexpected. And likely, a lot of times behind the scene, it's something on the infrastructure side behind the scenes, like possibly a VM running that's maybe acting a little funny, has some storage issues, things you might want to take a look at from that standpoint.
Hey, can you go back to your WAF?
We have pool membership information.
Go back to your WAF display.
Sure.
I don't know if this is a AST question or a Grafana question, but if you slide down to where your WAF feature, the WAF feature status, Is there a way to templatize, like if I have organizationally a minimum requirement of features, like no matter what application is deployed in the environment, these should always be enabled. Is there a way to templatize that so I would have some kind of an alert in this dashboard if I selected a big IP and I'm looking at the alerts of what's going on in the big IP, but then I also see, hey, this is out of spec?
Yeah, if you have a spec in mind, you can absolutely build your, either modify this dashboard or maybe build your own that would take that spec. I don't think it has a super great interface. Like if I give it in a YAML format, it'll just know how to do it. But you can build the queries around it and then set the alerting stuff up so that it will tell you, hey, this should be licensed and isn't, or vice versa. 100% doable. Yeah.
Okay. That's cool.
Back to the devices here. So again, on the pool membership, again, a different layer, different view. You have virtual servers, you have pool membership, then you have node. And so again, going back to the whole concept of, we're going to provide you with that information on what virtual server changes occurred, what pool changes have occurred, pool availability, so SLA uptime, not just on the virtual server side, on the pool and on the node. So that's always key to mean time to innocence, right? And just understanding, just in general terms, how your application's up and running. So again, we'll provide you with all that visibility, all that awareness. Again, please, you can share this data with your application owners, with your business teams, but it's something to always be mindful of. A lot of this is the mean time to resolution, and in my case, mean time to innocence, because typically everybody always says, oh, let's call the F5 folks. They know because they're smart folks. Let's provide a little bit of ownership here where you can actually, from an app standpoint, look at this view and make a decision for yourself. When you look at the device overview specifically, look at something a little bit more heavily utilized. When we start looking at these device-specific metrics, again, memory, CPU from that device, what license is enabled, your IP address from a management standpoint, is the device up and running? Is there failover peer status, version, processes by CPU memory, all that stuff that again, you would come to expect from an infrastructure tool and visualization standpoint. Device eye rolls. This to me is near and dear to me because, well, I write quite a few eye rolls, and the ability for AST to actually go in and tell me how many cycles it's used, how many executions, my failure rate, and my abort rate, not only from the eye roll standpoint, but from an event standpoint. So what I mean by that, you have an eye roll and it has 4 or 5 events into that. Well, guess what? I want to know where that event is failing. I need to go in and correct that event. Most people, it's common that you can do a HTTP to HTTPS conversion eye roll, pretty simple standard stuff. But when you start looking at what events, say on an HTTP to request event, I want to look at and that eye roll specifically and say, yeah, that's a clean eye roll. There's no aborts, there's no failures. We've been up and running for a week. There's millions of hits of that eye roll. I can go ahead and get very specific and show where that event is having problems or where within the eye roll it's having problems. I think that's key in development. Is in a lot of cases we always try and do like log local or something like that, which is very useful, right? But in a lot of cases that's a lot of information, and in some cases it's too much, and then you get overwhelmed with looking at that data. Let's see here. When we look at the GTM, we all know GTM and DNS, right? They kind of have different acronyms. Let me click on the DNS one here. So as you can see, we have request by rate type. So A records, you have quad A, C names, so on and so forth. So if you have a DNS instance up and running, we'll show you your wide IPs, if they're A record or not, listeners, all that fun stuff that go along with it. So that's the DNS view. I know I kind of went a little bit over long on time for giving a brief overview, Jason, so I do apologize on that. But
yeah, you have none to apologize
where we
for
sit
it.
from, at least AST.
Yeah, we asked a lot of questions along the way too, so it's not an issue. I love seeing it.
Good.
We did get a question. Great showed me the number of incidents. This is back on the WAF, but it's possible to get what category the incidents were or a little more data to identify the type of event. I think that metadata is there on the stuff. I don't know if we pull that back, but I know that metadata is there. And like you said, Chris, earlier, that's configurable, right? You can tweak and tune, assuming that data is something that we can collect.
Yeah. So I mean, there is some categorization around bot. I forget what the other categories. There's like 4 or 5 broad categories. The data that comes out of the ICR endpoint, I don't think. Yeah. So bot incidents, brute force, and then just generic incidents. That was about as granular as it got, at least when we were taking our first pass at figuring out what was in there. If there is more data, we could potentially add that in as well.
Okay, so that's feedback, Mike. If you take notes on what at least to be able to look at.
Sure.
Okay, well, do you want to show how quickly this thing can be installed by somebody who doesn't install it all the time? I've done it once, and I was up in minutes. So, do you want me to take a stab at it?
Yeah, if you don't mind, that'd be great. Yeah, okay. I'll stop sharing my screen.
All right, so this is the actual location. I threw it in chat. It's at github.com. It's out there in chat. And in fact, if you're on LinkedIn and you didn't I think I shared it there, but just in case, I'll throw it up here on screen. It's just github.com/F5 DevCentral/application-study-tool. And so the process is pretty quick. I can actually, if I just copy all of that, I can come over here and throw that in a notepad. Echo. Okay, so if I'm going to clone this, am I where I want to be? Yep. Okay. All right, and so second step there was to go into there, and then I want to copy that to that, and that to that, and I'm not needing to copy anything else. Okay, so I need to edit, and I need to edit those, right? And so pi.env. And this is okay, so talk me through this. This is the Grafana.
Yeah, so GF is...
say that one again, Mike.
Okay. Yes, all of the Grafana settings start with a GF_ prefix, and you can go to the Grafana website. So people have implemented like AD integration or LDAP OIDC connectors that you might want to turn on for this. All of the default Grafana environment variables will work here. Those two just say, admin and password is admin. Probably you should change that before you put it on the network. But for your laptop there, it's cool.
Okay. And if and the second section is optional if you wanted to upload those stats to F5 Data Fabric.
Correct. Yeah, we have the option to export some of the data in there to F5 Data Fabric. Again, you can control what goes where, but if you want to turn that on, talk to your SC to get a sensor token in 90.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so
I didn't really cover that, Jason. Just really quick on that note, just so everybody knows, that sensor secret token and ID. If you want, for instance, your sales engineer to take a look at data, if you want essentially support to look at some of that data, the ability to upload your metrics that you have here, it's very key, is that once you get this information, you can start uploading these metrics to F5, and we can assist and take a look at your configuration, what's happening within your environment. It's very useful from that standpoint. So just if you need it, great, let us know.
Okay, cool. But yeah, for just a quick walkthrough, we don't need that part. And then, so my env device secrets, here's where I put in my big IP password. And, if you break into my lab, there you go. That's my lab password.
So that file is one way to put the environment variables in there. Obviously, it's not super secure. So if you've got a vault that you want to integrate with,
Right.
or other means of doing that, you should do that as well.
Right. Yeah. In my super super secure lab here in under my desk, it's fine in a file. But yeah. All right. So then the next step, I got that done. Then I need to change my. Oh, I guess I can just do that whole line. So I'm going to change. This is the config. YAML is not my favorite. I'm just going to be honest. I hate YAML. But if I don't have to write YAML, I just have to update YAML. That's fine.
For sure. And most people probably don't need to do a ton to this file. What it really is it uses the configuration syntax of the OpenTelemetry collector. So there's tons of resources on there about how you configure all that stuff. But most people, probably the password stuff. So if you had multiple passwords you wanted to use, you can see up there about 4 or 5 lines above you is where it's telling it, look for the environment variable name big IP password 1. That'll be the default. So that top section is all default settings that get applied everywhere.
Gotcha.
You can override those on a per device basis. Right?
Okay. And then here, I don't have DNS and GTM, but this is where I would enable if I want to collect more than just LTM.
Right. And again, that's the default. So if you did it right there, it would turn it on for all your devices. So if it's just 1 or 2 devices that have it, then you would do it on the individual device.
Gotcha. And then insecure skip verify, I do. Yeah, I'll leave that for local lab. I'll leave that as is. But in a production environment, you want.
Actually, for the local lab, you need to set that to true. Otherwise, it will try to verify your cert. Yep.
Okay. And then don't change anything below. Also, I'm not exporting. So, okay. And then the next one, big IP receivers. So this is my local IPs. And then this is where you can do the device specific stuff, right?
Exactly. So every device will need its own name there. You can see big IP 1, 2, 3, 4, call them whatever you want. Only the big IP / part is important. And then, set your device. At least needs an endpoint because that's going to be different for every device. If you have different passwords, different DNS settings, different TLS, whatever, this is the spot that you do it on the per device level.
Okay. And so, we've been talking through it, but the actual changes I just made were very minimal and very fast. So, and then real quick, there's a question here. So absolutely 0 changes on big IP configuration end. Yes, no changes necessary on your big IP. This is just pulling data from it. Okay, so then I want to do a Docker run, and I went through the just a test run of this yesterday. I was like, Mike, it's not working. But the copy blocks on the GitHub stopped me right here at Python, and it skipped all the rest of this configuration. So it still worked, but it didn't actually configure anything. And so, and I'm not root account. Oh,
I got just that.
Dang it.
So taking those YAML files and kind of making them into the final config is a little Python script that's doing that. If you're at a big shop where you want to just directly configure the OpenTelemetry collector, that is definitely something you can do and probably would prefer to do.
Okay, app source bin entry point. No such file. Did I do something? Did I not get my actual? Oh, I know what the problem is. The app-v. No, I put it in there. It's missing one. So app-v present working directory I should be in. There we go. That should work.
Yeah. And if you're on a system with Python, you can just directly run that script as well. It might be easier if you run into trouble with the Docker stuff.
Yeah. And then back up here, the last little step was to Docker compose up. Okay. And it's doing something. And an error.
Your credentials are wrong. So you're getting a 401 on the login.
Oh, my credentials are wrong. Let me do that. Let me fix that. I'll just change it here since.
Yeah, perfect.
Nope. Okay. Now you know my super secret.
Both of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a good point. Make sure anytime you change something, you rerun that generation script if that's how you're configuring. Otherwise, it won't take effect.
Still complaining.
No.
That's definitely my password. Did it not update the? Okay.
Username.
Do I need
might have to update the configuration?
Oh, you're commented out there. See on the left. Yeah, there you go. So make sure. Oh, sorry. YAML hatred. It needs to be at the same level as endpoint. Yep. There you go.
Oh yes, one of my favorite things about YAML. So if I'm not messing up, this is a fast process. But if I'm having issues with formats and all that,
there's always something, right? Okay, good. We're a different error this time. So, okay, 400. You do not have a NAT configured on this, so that error is actually expected. There are certain modules that do not return anything, and if they're not licensed or configured or whatever, it'll spit those out just in case you actually do want data from those things and are not getting it unexpectedly. But it's okay to ignore them.
Okay, and then I should be able to go then to
3000. Yeah.
And there it is. And we had it set in there. The password was admin. It doesn't like that. I think I changed that. Well, I'm doing a bad demo. Yesterday's demo was really good. We're actually past time, but you can tell by the installation, it was very fast. I made mistakes. I probably fat fingered something, and I didn't get quite there in my installation. But that's not a tool problem. That was a me problem. So I did it yesterday. It worked fine. I wasn't under the pressure of live demos, and so it should just work. So can you run this without Docker? Yes, you can. It's in the GitHub instructions that you can do that. You don't have to have Docker. And yes, I'm running it. That's a Ubuntu VM running on my Proxmox. So for that, and then last question here before we call it a day. Would this be a good way for a customer to pull down metrics for their specific VIP? Absolutely. It's visibility of not just a specific VIP, but all the VIPs. And if you wanted to tune it just to that specific thing, or you had a dashboard, and I'm swagging here, you guys can correct me, but if you have a particular dashboard that they had permissions to see, or you shared out a link into your Grafana environment that you could share with the customer, then you could piecemeal that out.
Yeah, that's Jason. That's actually one of the more significant use cases. Is that the NetOps folks, the people that love Big IP and own and operate it, they actually share this information off to all their application owners. So that's a significant use case.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so we are past time. I got one more thing here. I'm in the midst.
There's one more question. Sorry, Jason.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the answer is definitely yes. You can either talk directly to your solutions engineer contact. Definitely add something within the GitHub repo, and we'll answer that as soon as we can.
Yep, cool. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. This is exciting. It's an exciting tool, and I look forward to see where it goes from here. Back on the iRules thing, you and I talked before previously, Michael, about not only can you view the cycles, but if I'm able to push out log data from the tracing and profiling aspects of Big IP Classic, you might be able to do other visualizations of that stuff too. So that might be something I play with on my own, in all my spare time, and that'd be useful too. Because I think a lot of the reason the people don't use that aspect of debugging iRules is because it's really hard to visualize what to do with all the log data that comes out of the rule profiling. And so if we could visualize it well for them, then that becomes a better tool than just print log statements in your iRules development. So
amen to that one. Yeah.
So, well, thank you both for joining. Highly informative, and I'm excited, and hopefully our customers are excited about what you guys have built.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks, guys. Okay. Well, we went a little bit long. It's 12:06 Central Time. And, I don't know when our next DevCentral Connect is going to be, but you'll know about it. We'll promote it on the socials. Thank you for joining us today. And if you have any questions, follow up, you can reach out to me at j.rom@f5.com. I'll get you connected to the right people. Or as Mike said, you can just add an issue out on the GitHub repo. So take care, everyone, and happy holidays in advance, it being December and all the holidays that are coming. So take care, everyone.
Well, thanks for checking out that video. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. While you're down there, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. You might want to check out one of these videos over here. And if you haven't already, go check out community.f5.com. This is where all the DevCentral Connects hosts hang out, as well as the rest of the community. It's free to sign up, and we'll see you there.